Today's big idea. Europe is rethinking the once unthinkable. With Russia's war and fresh doubts about Washington's long-term commitment, leaders are openly questioning whether the U.S. nuclear umbrella will hold, and what to do if it doesn't. Emmanuel Macron has even mused about putting France's force de frappe in the service of Europe. The author said the probability of an attack on a European NATO member is now at a level not seen since the late 1970s, so Europe needs to take stock of its nuclear choices. And as always, a bit of a disclaimer, this is a summary of the author's opinion, those authors being Florence Gaub and Stefan Mair, in their recent article in this past Forward Affairs titled Europe's Bad Nuclear Options. And this is the July-August issue of 2025. So to get into it, the lesson. So deterrence rests on two pillars, the capabilities to respond and the resolve to use them. Judged by those criteria, none of Europe's options currently, to quote, passes muster. Still, even if the moment to decouple from U.S. protection hasn't arrived, the piece argues Europe must prepare now both to signal Washington that deterrence concerns are serious and to build a foundation in case abandonment fears come true. So, first, the threat picture. So, Russia's arsenal is vast, about 5,580 warheads, and Moscow has stationed dozens in Belarus, putting NATO territory in easy range. The risk is not just numbers, but willingness to coerce. With nuclear threats, that's the backdrop for today's European debate. So they basically came up with three options. The first being a French-British umbrella for Europe. Could Paris and London extend their deterrence more broadly? The authors say that a Franco-British umbrella would lack sufficient capabilities, and beneficiaries would doubt its reliability in a crisis. In short, there are credibility problems. Option 2 is a pan-European bomb. So a truly European deterrent shifts an existential decision to an entity with indirect democratic legitimacy. In today's EU, that fails the credibility test and risks clashing with the continent's democratic norms. And the third option, so basically national arsenals. So some capitals could, in theory, build their own weapons, but the legal and political walls are high. Germany, for example, is bound by the NPT and by Article 3 of the 2+4 treaty. And its society retains deep pacifist and anti-nuclear instincts. Even civilian nuclear power has been phased out, as an example. And then violating these constraints would shake neighbors and treaty partners. So who's next and kind of what are the workarounds? If any major state is talking most openly, it's Poland. Prime Minister Donald Tusk told Parliament in March that Poland must pursue the most advanced capabilities, including nuclear, calling it, quote, a race for security, not for war. One theoretical bridge idea, France or the UK could lend out some weapons temporarily while others build capacity, creating strength in numbers. That could also allow deterrence by denial, blocking an adversary's strike in the first place, not just punishment afterwards, but it raises the risks of provoking Russia. Then there's Europe's nuclear politics, and basically how we got here. So, public opinion has long been skeptical. In the 1980s, NATO's dual-track deployments triggered mass protests and a culture of anti-nuclear fear, think the 1983 film The Day After. Even as post-Cold War détente lowered anxieties, many Europeans continue to associate all things nuclear more with destruction than with deterrence. The Ukraine war and Russian rhetoric have put these issues back on the table. So the global spillover risk, proliferation doesn't stop at the Rhine. If uncertainty about U.S. guarantees pushes South Korea to go nuclear, the authors warn Japan could follow. And that kind of cascade in East Asia would reframe Europe's own debate. So the bottom line is basically, for now, all three European paths have serious flaws. A Franco-British umbrella looks thin, an EU bomb lacks legitimacy, National programs face legal, political, and strategic hazards, yet doing nothing while assuming the U.S. umbrella will always be open is itself a gamble. So basically, to conclude, Gaub and Mair don't celebrate any of these paths. They call them bad options. But in a world where Russia brandishes thousands of warheads and U.S. politics feel less predictable, Europe can't afford magical thinking. Begin the planning, stress test the politics and law, and get honest about what would make a credible deterrent if the U.S. shield ever faltered. And if this caught your attention, I suggest you go read it yourself. Obviously, to keep these relatively short and also not just read the whole article. There's a lot of information that's left out, but they're all pretty in-depth and pretty decent reads. So with that being said, we will give a little bit about the authors. So Florence Gaub is a director of the research division at the NATO Defense College, and then Stefan Mair is director of the German Institute for International and Security Affairs. And so with that being said, I will see you guys on the next one.